it will be at 4200 by default. So localhost colon 4200, if you've successfully set it up, will be open in your browser like that. So again, here again is the high-level project flow in a use case diagram. So a user will create an HTTP request and basically would be served up, the starting point, how you would look at it is, because it's a single page application, everything is served in the index.html. You would actually have an app root. Okay, this app root is going to be inside your Angular module, your main module that every Angular has, that is bootstrapped when it starts up. Okay, and you will have a TS file that corresponds to each of your components, and you're going to be able to design it basically by having different modules. So there's an example right there, having a router module, so you can usually have a login, a welcome, and any other components that you require. Okay, so the key components when you open your source folder is you'll see an app module.ts that contains basically the configuration of the application, and all of the other modules that would need to be imported or exported or declared would be in the app module, including your components. So one example is the app routing module.ts, which contains all the URL mappings. Okay, and the app component.ts contains the definition of the root component, which is in the app.module.ts. The landing page all the time will be in index.html, and it's always the first page of the application, and it's bootstrapped, as I mentioned before. So if you wanted to create an application, a login application, you can actually do it quite simply by scaffolding. So what we want to do is you want to create a login page, okay, and have people have a username or password. So how would you do that at a high level? Okay. So the basic building blocks is basically your module, and inside your module you create a component. Okay, that component is created for one view. Okay, so if you have a login and welcome 2 pages, you would have to create both of these components. So to create a component, it's very simple. You would do the schematic. Okay, a schematic command would be generate. You can use generate, ng generate component, okay, and then the name. So if you wanted to create a login component, you would do ng generate component login, or you can use the short forms G or C. Okay, so ng G or C would also be generate. So this would create a login and also a welcome component. So by default, you'll have your TS file, okay, and you'll have a spec file which runs a unit test and a template. Okay, so generally speaking, you would have an HTML page or a template in your template section to present the data, and your TS would basically have any type of logic, your lifecycle hooks on what you want to do. Okay, in that file. Okay, so if you're going to do that, you would have your CSS file, your TS, and your spec, because this is basically what is generated. So you define all your CSS in your CSS file, your HTML would have your view, and your TS would basically have any type of logic that you would require. Okay. So to define routes, you would, in order to access it, you would basically specify it in the app routing module, okay? And you can specify the type of components that you want to route to, okay? And then after that, you're going to be able to specify the components there, and this is what your app.module.ts file should look like, and your app routing module.ts is done, okay? We can import the routing router module, okay, the router module for root, and specify the routes, okay, and we also need to export it so that other modules would know about it, okay, and once you're done, you're going to be able to access the URLs based on the mapping there, based on the path in the component. So if you hit localhost 4200 login, you'll get into the login component. Usually it'll say like login works after, or welcome component works, or welcome works. So you'll be able to go into that HTML markup in TS and modify the code based on your needs. Okay. So if you initialize the variable message and display it at the HTML page, you go to the welcome.component.ts file, and you can basically implement the onInit method. If you want to, that would be the ng onInit. Okay. So and we can also put a message. So we can create a public message here. Okay. And we can use interpolation with the mustache syntax to project that string value onto the page in the HTML page. Okay. And then if you wanted to create the login, you would basically need to pass in the router, okay, into the constructor, create a username, a password, and message. You can inject your router, okay, and put your logic based on your navigation of how you want the sign in button to work. Okay, so if you put the valid username or password, you should be routed to the welcome page. Okay, and so therefore you can go into Angular.io and learn at a very high level, and this is just an overview video, how directives are basically working. So they're basically two-way bounded, and the syntax is right there. Usually you would put these these brackets, and that's probably the name why we call it Angular, because we put these angular brackets around it to define the bindings of the directive. Okay. And we have different types of directives. So we have other directives like click. So you, when a click is fired, you can bind it onto an event. So previously we were creating a sign-in button. So you would write the implementation of sign-in in the TS file. And on click, that logic would be executed when you click on the button. Okay. So again, to just recap, every single Angular project is just basically made out of a series of modules in which you need at least one root module to bootstrap the application. And essentially, each module will contain components, directives, pipes, and services. So directives are used for data binding, as you saw in the previous. Pipes are generally used for formatting, and you would basically use like the pipe for syntax when you go to the Angular.io documentation. And services that are normally dependency injected, you usually use the @injectable to specify that something is injectable that will be reused throughout your application. So thank you so much, and I realize this is quite quick, but I just wanted to give a very high level overview of Angular. Thank you so much.